My name is Rachel Emmons. I'm 30 years old, and last night I was asked to stay quiet about the biggest moment of my career just so my sister could have the spotlight. I'd driven 2 hours from Lexington to Pikeville, still wearing my work flats, still running on the adrenaline of a massive product launch. But the second I walked through the door, my mom pulled me aside and whispered, "Let's not talk about your job tonight. Lindsay's got real news." Real news. Before we get into it, drop a comment if you've ever been told to dim your light so someone else could shine. And hit that like button if you've ever smiled through your own erasure, because what happened next? Yeah, it changed how I see everything. Let me take you back to that moment standing in my mother's kitchen, holding a bottle of wine and a silence I didn't choose. The kitchen smelled like ham glaze and rosemary rolls, but all I could focus on was the way my mother wouldn't meet my eyes. I just stepped in, arms full, wine in one hand, dessert tray in the other, when she leaned in close and said it so quietly, I almost thought I imagined it. "Let's not talk about your job tonight. Lindsay has real news." She smiled as she said it. The kind of smile you give when you're smoothing down a tablecloth over a stain. I froze there in the doorway, still wearing my badge from the office, still flushed from the last-minute pitch call I'd taken in the parking lot of the gas station near mile marker 183. "Sure," I said. What else was there to say? I set the wine on the counter like it might explode. It was a decent bottle, 2 Cabernet, not the $6 stuff. I'd bought it earlier that week to celebrate my promotion. Senior data architect. I hadn't told anyone yet. I was going to tell them tonight. But now we were back in this script again. Lindsay breezed in 10 minutes later with her fiancé David. Looking every bit the small-town sweetheart in a dusty pink blouse and shiny new name tag that said, Pediatrics Lead Nurse. The room bloomed around her like it always did. David carried in a fruit tray. Everyone cooed like he'd hauled in a diamond. "Did you tell them yet?" my mom said, clasping her hands like she was watching the end of a Hallmark movie. "Tell us what?" Aunt Missy chirped, already halfway through her second roll. Lindsay beamed. "I got invited to join the neonatal mentorship program. Only 5 nurses from the region were selected." Gasps, claps, actual claps. Even Uncle Curtis stood up and raised his iced tea like he was making a toast. "To real success," he said. I smiled. I really did. But something inside me pulled away like a tide. I watched as they all leaned in, asking Lindsay about baby incubators and tiny heart monitors like they were plot twists in a thriller. My dad even said, "That's God's work, baby girl," and gave her that side hug he saves for special occasions. No one asked me how my week was, or what I was doing in Lexington, or why I looked like I hadn't slept in days. I sat at the edge of the living room, balancing a paper plate of green beans and sweet potato casserole, listening to Lindsay explain the emotional toll of pediatric care. "I held a newborn whose mother couldn't stay more than 5 minutes, she said. I fed him while his dad sat outside on a smoke break. The whole table went still. That's the kind of thing that changes you," my mom said, wiping under her glasses. Across the room, I saw my bottle of wine still sitting unopened on the kitchen counter. It looked out of place now, like something I'd brought for the wrong kind of party. A teenage cousin flopped into the chair beside me. "Wait, don't you work with, apps or something?" she asked, popping a roll into her mouth. I nodded. "Software development. Like games? Like budgeting tools. Predictive analytics for small credit unions." She blinked. "Cool, I think." Her brother, maybe 14, piped up from behind us. "She probably works for Google or aliens." Everyone laughed, including me. Sort of. It wasn't cruel, just clueless. But I felt it, sharp and familiar, in the pit of my chest. David refilled Lindsay's tea. Someone asked if she'd get more letters after her name now. Meanwhile, I pulled out my phone under the table and skimmed through an email from my team. Demo complete. Pilot went smoothly. Board approved the full-scale rollout. 12 months of my life, compressed into 2 lines no one here would ever read. I glanced back toward the kitchen. Still unopened. Still mine. "Rachel," my mom called, jolting me out of my head. Can you grab Lindsay's gift bag from the back room? We forgot it earlier. I nodded and stood. In that moment, I realized something. It wasn't just that they didn't understand what I did. It's that they didn't want to. And if that was true, really true, then maybe it was time I stopped offering pieces of myself they never intended to hold. I passed the kitchen on my way to the back room and brushed my fingers over the wine bottle's neck. Then I walked right past it. Yet, unopened. Just like me. After dinner, I lay in the same twin bed I'd had since middle school, staring at the glow in the dark stars still stuck to the ceiling. I was 30, and they were still up there. The mattress sagged a little more than I remembered. Or maybe I just weighed more. Carrying years of silence can do that. Down the hall, I heard my parents laughing with Lindsay. Something about her work, or her wedding. Or probably both. I rolled over and caught a glimpse of the corkboard above my old desk. Half the thumbtacks had fallen out. The photos had curled at the edges. There was one of me at 12, hunched over an old Dell tower with the side panel off. I was holding a flashlight in my mouth like a mechanic, wires everywhere. That was the first computer I fixed. Not built. Fixed. The modem kept dropping out, and no one could figure out why. My dad cussed out the cable company 3 times. My mom unplugged and replugged everything, twice. I stayed up late reading forums on our neighbor's Wi-Fi, and by the next morning, I'd rewired the splitter and stabilized the signal. It held. No one cheered. No one even asked how I did it. My mom just said, "You really need to get to bed earlier," and handed me a Pop-Tart. Lindsay, on the other hand, once made a macaroni necklace for Grandma and got a full standing ovation at Sunday dinner. I don't blame her. She played her part beautifully. I just played mine invisibly. Even then, I knew I was good at things no one else in my family understood. But back then, I still thought maybe, just maybe, that would make them proud one day. I leaned over the edge of the bed and reached under the frame, half expecting it to be gone. But it was still there. That old spiral-bound notebook. The cover had mostly peeled off. A few wires were bent. Inside, the pages were filled with messy diagrams, color-coded sticky notes, and lists of problems I solved at 13 that still make me proud today. Page 17. Router not assigning IP, rebuilt settings manually through admin panel. Margin note. Dad said, "That's nice," and went back to ESPN. Page 44. Custom-built budgeting app using HTML tables. I'd made it for my dad after he got laid off from the mining equipment plant. I even color-coded the monthly expenses if they exceeded income. He never opened it. Said he already had a calculator. I swallowed hard and ran my hand over the page. My handwriting was smaller back then. Neater, too. Like I was trying to prove something with every line. I think I was. They loved Lindsay because she was useful in ways they understood: holding babies, cleaning cuts, bringing people casseroles. She was tangible. Familiar. I was. Well, I was always upstairs, typing things no one could see. Sometimes I wonder if that's why they never asked. It's hard to praise what you don't recognize. Still, I kept building. Kept solving. By high school, I was fixing neighbors' printers and teaching myself JavaScript at 2 a.m. on weekends. I built a freelance site on a beat-up laptop I bought from a pawn shop. Earned my first $500 before my 16th birthday. My dad said, "That's good money for gas. Do one." Then he asked if I'd applied to any real jobs. That's when it started. This quiet pattern. This invisible rule that Lindsay's milestones were family events, and mine were solo ones. Her nursing badge hung on the fridge for a year. My college acceptance letter was pinned behind a grocery list. I didn't expect much by the time I turned 18. But a part of me still hoped. I think that's the cruelest thing about hope. It sticks around longer than it should. Outside, the wind knocked a branch against the siding. Inside, I closed the notebook and held it against my chest for a second longer than I meant to. I should have thrown it away a long time ago. But some things you don't toss no matter how many years go by. Some things you keep just to remember the shape of what you wanted. I put it back under the bed. Then I turned out the light. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like bacon grease and toast crusts, and the coffee pot was down to the burnt half-inch nobody wanted. My mom stood at the counter folding paper napkins with the kind of precision you'd expect from someone hosting a mayor. Lindsay sat at the table with David, scrolling through honeymoon rentals on her phone like the world had paused just for them. I was still in sweatpants, holding my mug like a shield, trying to find a place to land in the room. "You sleep okay?" my mom asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I said. Tried to catch up. She nodded and kept folding. It wasn't hostile. Just practiced. Like this was how we spoke to each other, no on the surface, with only approved topics and pre-approved enthusiasm. I reached for the milk and casually said, "So, our team's launching the new product this week. I'm leading the technical side." My voice was even, not showy. Just matter of fact. "Oh, that's nice, sweetheart," she said, almost instantly. "What's it do again? Like, money stuff?" David looked up from his phone. "You make apps, right?" Lindsay didn't look up. "Kind of," I said, setting the milk down. "It's a tool that helps smaller banks manage risk. Predicts who's likely to default based on transaction data." Silence. Then David nodded like I'd spoken in Morse code. "Sounds complicated." My mom chuckled. "Well, as long as you're keeping busy." There it was. The phrase. As long as you're keeping busy. Not proud. Not impressed. Not even curious. Just busy. I sipped my coffee and smiled like it didn't sting. Then my Uncle Curtis wandered in, scratching his shoulder through his flannel. "You back in town for good, Rachel?" "No, just the weekend." He poured himself a mug and leaned on the fridge. "Still doing that computer thing?" "Yep." "Do you fix printers?" "Mine keeps yelling at me about paper when it has paper." "I write code," I said. "Mostly infrastructure. Systems architecture." "Curtis started." I added, "So, not printers." He shrugged and reached for the sugar bowl. Across the table, Lindsay giggled at something on her screen. "Mom, look at this beach cottage," she said, turning the phone. "It's in Savannah. Fireplace, wraparound porch. David says we might book it for October." "Oh, honey, it's gorgeous," my mom said, lighting up like someone flipped a switch. "That's where they filmed one of those wedding shows, isn't it?" I faded out of the conversation like static. Saturday back. Watched as every detail of Lindsay's future was unwrapped and passed around like a gift basket. I caught myself staring at the fridge. A new photo of Lindsay and David was clipped front and center with a magnet from Dollywood. Right below, half covered by a takeout menu, is an old photo of me at my college graduation. The colors were faded now. The frame was cracked. I'd worn a navy blue dress under my robe that day. Gave a speech no one remembered. I'd landed a job in Austin before the ink dried on my diploma. I was 22 and thought maybe, just maybe, that would be the moment they saw me. It wasn't. I turned back to the table, still smiling, still quiet. The truth is, I don't think they ever meant to ignore me. I think they just understood Lindsay. And when you understand someone, it's easier to celebrate them. But understanding takes effort. And I learned the hard way not everyone wants to make that effort. "Did you hear that, Rach?" my mom asked suddenly. E blinked. "Sorry?" She was saying they might do a dolphin tour. "Isn't that cute?" I nodded. "Very." Lindsay looked up, finally noticing me. "You okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just tired." It wasn't a lie. But it wasn't the whole truth, either. I stood and rinsed my mug in the sink. The ceramic clink echoed just a little too sharp. On the windowsill above the sink sat a faded porcelain angel. It had been there since I was 10. Missing a wing, dust in the folds of its robe. I used to wonder if my mom kept it because she loved Eider, just because it had always been there. Now I wasn't sure it mattered. Some things stay visible by being familiar. Others vanish because no one bothers to look twice. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and walked back toward the hall. Behind me, the conversation picked up again about dolphins, porches, and soft white sand. And just like that, I was gone from the room. The living room had been rearranged since I was last home. Same scratchy beige carpet, same fake fern in the corner. But now there was a fold-out card table wedged between the recliner and the sliding glass door, set with paper plates and the mismatched silverware that only came out when company showed up. I'd brought in the extra chairs from the garage and was about to sit at the big dining table when my mom turned to me and said, "Rachel, sweetheart, can you scoot to the small table? We've got more people than usual." I looked at the space she was pointing to. The card table. Next to the grandkids. "Sure," I said. "Of course." She handed me a tray of rolls like that settled it. "Thanks, honey." "Okay." I carried the tray over and sat next to my 12-year-old cousin who was deep into a plate of mac and cheese, headphones still around his neck from whatever game he'd been playing before dinner. I hadn't been at the kids' table since I was 19. Maybe younger. Across the room, Lindsay and David were cozied up between my Uncle Curtis and Aunt Missy. My dad refilled David's tea like he'd known him since birth. Someone passed a bowl of green beans and called Lindsay future Mama of the Year. The clatter of forks and soft gospel music from the radio filled the room, but I couldn't hear any of it. I just stared at my plate. "Hey, Rachel," my cousin mumbled between bites. "Do you work for TikTok?" He blinked. "No." "Oh." He shrugged. "I thought you did computer stuff." "I do, just not that kind." He nodded like I'd said nothing and turned back to his phone. Next to him, his sister whispered, "Isn't TikTok in China?" The conversation at the adult table was flowing like a faucet. I caught phrases here and there, something about Lindsay helping a patient with a broken hip, someone else asking David how many hours he worked at the clinic. "He's got calluses on his hands," Uncle Curtis joked, holding up David's palm like it was a badge of honor. "That's how you know he does real work." My dad laughed. "You're raising 'em right, Lindsay." That one stuck. Like a cough I couldn't get rid of. I looked down at my hands, no calluses. Just dry skin from too much typing and too little sunlight. I bit into a roll that tasted like sawdust. The buzz of my phone in my lap pulled me back. I glanced down, half expecting a news alert or spam. But it was from Bethan, your product manager in Lexington. "Client demo went better than expected. CEO wants to pull you in early for partnership pitch. Big stuff, Rach." My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, I thought about showing it to someone. Anyone. But the thought disappeared as quickly as it came. This table didn't care about pitch decks or user flow. They cared about wedding dresses and wrist blood pressure cuffs, and whether David could make chicken soup from scratch. I slid my phone back into my coat pocket. The small table rocked slightly when I leaned on it. One leg was shorter than the others, and I instinctively wedged a napkin under it without thinking. Still fixing things, I guess. After dinner, I helped carry dishes to the kitchen. Lindsay stayed in the dining room, showing baby name boards on her phone to a circle of women who laughed and gasped and touched her arm. Nobody touched mine. In the kitchen, I stacked plates beside the sink. My mom walked in humming to herself, wiping down the counters. "Everything turn out okay?" she asked. "Dinner was great," I said. "Really?" She looked over at me, then at the table I'd just come from. "Oh, I meant to say, thank you for giving up your seat. We just didn't have room." I nodded. "It's fine. It's just a table," she added. I opened the dishwasher door and started loading. But it wasn't just a table. It was a place. A placement. And I wasn't placed. I was moved. There's a difference. She didn't mean anything by it. That's the thing she never does. But that night, as I drove back to my cousin's house where I was staying, the silence in the car was louder than the dinner had ever been. I thought about what Bethany had said. About the pitch. About the big stuff. And all I could think was, the bigger it gets, the less they seem to notice. I didn't unpack for 3 days after I got back to Lexington. My duffel sat half-zipped by the door, jacket crumpled on top, charger cords tangled in a pile that looked exactly like how I felt. I went straight into Monday like nothing happened. Back-to-back stand-ups, code reviews, the usual swarm of Slack pings asking for just one quick thing. And honestly, I preferred it that way. At work, no one told me to stay quiet. No one told me to scoot to the side. They just listened, respected me, counted on me. By Tuesday afternoon, Melanami boss called me into her office. Well, not office. Glass-walled startup nook with a dying succulent and 2 mugs that said, "Break the system, not yourself." "Rachel," she said, motioning me to sit. "Just got off the phone with Bank Unity." My stomach tensed. I knew this pitch mattered. They were the biggest name on our target list. "They want to move forward," she said, grinning. "They're ready to license the full suite." "I'll be." I blinked. "All of it?" "All of it," she said. "And they want you to lead rollout." I smiled, said all the right thank yous, nodded through the next steps and integration strategy. But the whole time, this pressure started building in my chest. It wasn't nerves. It was the question I couldn't stop asking myself. Who do I even tell? Later that night, I called home. Figured I'd try. It was around 8. Mom picked up on the second ring, breathless. "Hey, sweetheart," she said. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, sliding into the kitchen chair. "Just got out of work." "You still at that same company?" "Yeah. We actually just landed a big client today." "That's great, honey." Her voice was warm, but distracted. "Hold on, your dad's asking something." I waited. Listened to the muffled shuffle of their conversation. She came back after a beat. "Sorry, Lindsay's here. She's making that lemon chicken you used to love." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Tell her I said hi." She said hi back. My mom called away from the phone, then returned. "Anyway, what were you saying? Something about work?" "It's not important," I said quickly. "Just a small win." "Well, good," she replied. "As long as you're keeping busy." There it was again. That phrase. I said goodbye, hung up, and stared at the wallpaper on my phone. A photo of my whiteboard mid-sprint planning covered in arrows, acronyms, and market data. To me, it was art. To them, it was static. I set the phone down and stared out the kitchen window. There was a small restaurant across the street. Someone inside was mopping the floor in slow, tight circles. Their light looked warmer than mine. I went to the fridge, opened it, then closed it again without grabbing anything. That hunger wasn't about food. The next morning, I walked into our daily huddle and everyone clapped. Melina handed me a little coffee shop gift card with a sticky note that read, "Your code closed the deal. Proud of you. M." It wasn't flashy, but it meant more than any toast or fridge magnet ever had. I took the card back to my desk and stared at it for a second. Then I opened my personal group text, the one my mom still called the family thread. I typed, "Big work news, our platform's going statewide. I'm leading rollout." Paused. Deleted the whole thing. Instead, I scrolled back and looked at the last 5 messages. Pictures of Lindsay's new curtains. A casserole recipe. A meme about nurses being superheroes. I closed the thread. And then I did something I hadn't done before. I removed the notification badge. Just slid the toggle off like it was nothing. Like it didn't mean anything. But it did. It meant I was done chasing their understanding. They didn't have to get it. Because the world I'd built for myself? It was real. It was growing. And maybe that was enough. For now. The daffodils were blooming along the fence when I pulled into the driveway. It was Easter weekend, and my mom had already set the folding chairs out in the yard, even though the forecast said rain. "People will just sit on the porch," she told me over the phone. "It's tradition." Inside, everything smelled like ham and brown sugar. Same plastic bunny wreath on the door. Same bowl of jelly beans on the counter. Same sense that no matter how long I'd been gone, nothing here had changed. Except me. "Hey, stranger." Uncle Todd called from the backyard, holding a paper plate stacked with deviled eggs. "Didn't think we'd see you again this soon." I smiled. It's only been a few weeks. He slapped my shoulder like I'd just fixed his truck. Still doing the computer thing? Yep, still doing the computer thing. Well, he said, nodding toward Lindsay, who was carrying a crock pot inside. Your sister's got a real job now. Helping folks, making a difference. I fint. The words landed like a cold glass of water down the back of my shirt. I nodded, too stunned to answer. Or maybe just too tired. I stepped into the kitchen and set down the carrot cake I'd brought. No one noticed. Did you hear what Todd said? My mom asked Lindsay as she walked in. He called you our little angel in scrubs. Lindsay laughed, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I've been working overtime in geriatrics. They're short-staffed again. You're always going above and beyond, my mom said, squeezing her hand. I waited for someone to say, Rachel works overtime too. Or even Rachel's helping small towns get better banking access. But no one did. Because no one asked. And Lindsay sweet, smiling Lindsay just looked down and stirred the mashed potatoes. Later, during lunch, I sat across from Aunt Missy, who asked if I was still in school. I graduated 8 years ago, I said, smiling tightly. Oh, well, I wasn't sure, she laughed. You're always learning those internet things. I nodded. Yeah, I build financial tools. We're launching a product that helps community banks reduce loan default rates. She blinked. I might as well have said I was building a rocket in my bathtub. That's nice, dear, she said, turning to ask Lindsay about her Easter casserole. I looked down at my plate. A single pea had rolled away from the rest. In that moment, I felt like that peasmal, out of place, ignored. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was a message from Melina. Press release went out. We're officially live in 5 states. Couldn't have done it without you. I stared at the screen. 5 states. Tens of thousands of people would see our platform. Use it. Maybe sleep easier at night because of it. But right now, I was sitting at a table where someone just asked Lindsay for her lemon square recipe like it was the Nobel Prize. And nobody even knew I was changing lives too. The thing is, I wasn't jealous of Lindsay. Not really. She was good at what she did. People loved her because she gave them something to hold onto: warmth, comfort, care. My work didn't come with hugs or stories. It came with numbers. Data. Outcomes that took time to show up. But just because something's quiet doesn't mean it's not powerful. And just because they didn't see it didn't mean it wasn't there. Still, it would have been nice to be seen anyway. After dessert, I walked past the hallway where the family photos hung. New ones had been added. Lindsay and David at the lake. Lindsay with a baby in her arms. Even a photo of Lindsay standing in front of her hospital with a bouquet of balloons. Nothing of me. Not even the graduation photo that used to be there. I didn't say anything. Just stood there for a long moment, then walked back outside. The wind had picked up. The chairs were empty now. Everyone was on the porch, talking and laughing and refilling lemonade. I sat on the swing alone, checked my email one more time, and saw the numbers from our beta test. 96% retention. 4.8 star rating. Rural deployment success in Kentucky highest to date. I exhaled. Then closed the app. No one clapped, no one noticed. But I did. And maybe for now that had to be enough. The text came the morning of Lindsay's birthday dinner. From my mom. Just 2 sentences. Can you not mention your work tonight? Lindsay's had a hard week, and we really want this to be her night. I read it twice. Then a third time. It wasn't a question. It wasn't even dressed up with a smiley face or softened with a, hope you understand. It was a directive. Like telling someone not to wear white to a wedding. Only this time, the dress was my whole identity. I stared at my phone while my coffee cooled beside me. For a split second, I thought about replying something snarky. But I didn't. Because I already knew I'd say yes. I always did. That night, I walked into my parents' house holding a gift bag with a candle and a mug that said, "Nurses make it better." I had picked it up at the pharmacy on the way over. It felt hollow. Like a prop in a play I wasn't allowed to star in. The house was full, voices echoing down the hall, casseroles lining the counters, the living room rearranged to make space for folding chairs and photo ops. Lindsay looked beautiful, of course. Soft curls, tasteful makeup, a flowy dress in her signature blush pink. She greeted me with a hug that felt like an apology before anything had even been said. "Thanks for coming," she whispered. "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Even if I felt like I already had. We gathered in the dining room for the toast. My dad clinked his glass and started in with a speech about how proud he was. About how Lindsay gave her time and her heart. About how not everyone can do what she does. "Some people work with numbers," he said, smiling. "But Lindsay works with people." Everyone laughed. I laughed too. Quietly. Melina had called me that morning to say the Wall Street Journal was running a feature on our platform. They'd quoted my segment directly. I was told to expect traffic spikes. But I wasn't allowed to talk about it. Because Lindsay's week had been hard. Because this was her night. After dinner, I stood at the sink rinsing plates while the rest of the family moved on to birthday cake and gift bags. My mom came up beside me, drying silverware. "You're being really gracious, Rachel," she said softly. "I know it's not always easy." I didn't answer. She reached for another spoon. "It's just, not everyone understands your world. And sometimes, it's easier to keep the peace." I looked at her. At the woman who taught me to say thank you, even when I didn't mean it. Who once made me return a gift because I'd forgotten to write a card. "Keeping the peace with who?" I asked. She blinked. "The people who never ask what I do? Who change the subject when I speak?" She shifted her weight. "It's not like that, honey." "Then what is it?" Because to me, it felt exactly like that. I turned off the faucet, wiped my hands, and walked outside. The air was cool. A few people were gathered on the porch, laughing at something David had said. I stood in the shadow of the screen door, invisible. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A friend had tagged me in the WSJ article. "This is my brilliant friend Rachel changing the game for small-town families." I tapped the link and scrolled. There was my name. My words. My face. The article had already been shared over 1,000 times. Inside, someone shouted, "Cake time." I closed the app, tucked the phone away, and watched from the porch as everyone crowded around Lindsay, singing the same birthday song we'd sung since we were kids. Her candlelit face glowed in the dark kitchen. Mine stayed in the doorway. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, headlights slicing through the dark hills, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would never silence my story again to make someone else comfortable. If they wanted to hear about it, they could read it in the paper. Melina ordered cake. Not for her birthday. For mine. Technically, it was 2 days early, but she surprised me during our all-hands meeting with a chocolate sheet cake and a card signed by the whole team. The sticky note on the envelope read, "To the mind behind the magic. Don't forget to celebrate." I smiled for the group picture. Laughed when Jake from Dev made a joke about me becoming our hometown fintech celebrity. Oh. But later, when I sat back down at my desk, I found myself staring at the corner of my screen where the company Slack window blinked with emojis. And I felt floaty. Not happy. Not sad. Just somewhere above it all. Melina leaned into my cubicle with a grin. "You good?" "Yeah," I said. "It's just weird." Weird good or weird bad? I paused. Then told the truth. Both. She nodded like she understood. And maybe she did. Later that night, I posted a photo of the cake to my story just for friends. Caption: "Grateful to be seen." And then I called home. My dad answered on the third ring. "Hey, pumpkin, everything okay?" "Yeah," I said. "Just calling to say hi. It's my birthday tomorrow." He paused. "Already?" "Shoot, I thought it was next week." "It's all right. You do anything fun?" I swallowed. "The team got me cake," I said. "Ah, that's nice. Lindsay said she might swing by later, wants to use your mom's cricket machine." I waited. Waited for the part where he'd say something about me. About how proud he was. About the article. About anything. But he just went on about how the lawnmower blade came loose again, and he had to fix it himself. I told him to be careful. Then said I had to go. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I just folded. That's the best word for it. I folded back into the quiet part of myself where I kept the things they couldn't or wouldn't understand. I walked into the kitchen and saw the company mug sitting in the drying rack. Build quiet, win loud. A gift from Melina when we hit our first revenue goal. It made me think of something Lindsay once said at dinner. Your work's impressive, Rach. I just wish Mom and Dad could wrap their heads around it. She meant well. But it wasn't the wrapping that mattered. It was the reaching. They never even tried. I opened the fridge and pulled out leftovers from the Thai place I liked. Saturday on the couch. Ate in silence. Scrolled through messages from coworkers and college friends. You inspire me. So proud of you. This is just the beginning. Then a text popped up in the family group thread. From Mom. A picture of Lindsay holding a bouquet of flowers from one of her patients. Caption. She's everyone's favorite nurse even off the clock. The thread lit up. Hearts. Thumbs. Comments from aunts and cousins. Nobody remembered my birthday. Not even the fake kind of remembering. I clicked out of the thread and tossed my phone face down on the couch. Then I sat there, staring at the dark television screen. 2 lives. 1 face. In one world, I was being featured in industry podcasts, speaking on panels, launching tools that helped thousands of working-class families escape cycles of debt. In the other, I was the girl who worked on computers and brought store-bought pie to holidays. I didn't know which one was the mask anymore. Or maybe they both were. The next morning, I checked the mail on my way out the door. A card from Lindsay. Front said, "To my brilliant sister." Inside. You always did things your own way. Hope they finally start seeing what I've seen all along. Happy birthday, love, L. No one else sent anything. But I held that card in my hand for a long time. Because for once, she didn't talk over me. She didn't change the subject. She just saw me. And even if she was late, she was the only one who showed up at all. It was a Wednesday. Nothing special. I was knee-deep in debugging a permissions issue that kept crashing our dashboard when my phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Aunt Nora. I hadn't heard from her in months, maybe a year. She was my mom's older sister, the one who wore embroidered cardigans and sent chain emails about miracle vitamins. Hello? Rachel, hi. Her voice was high-pitched and too cheerful, like someone trying to sound casual on a wiretap. Hey, Aunt Nora. Everything okay? Oh, yes, she laughed nervously. Well, I Googled you. He blinked. You, what? I was looking for that article on heart, healthy recipes, and I typed something wrong and suddenly, there you were. Your face. In a tech article. I turned in my chair slowly. You found the Wall Street Journal piece? That's the one, she said. I had to read it twice. I didn't understand all the terminology, but goodness, you're doing big things. Alder. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. I guess I am. She continued talking something about how proud she was, how she'd emailed it to her neighbor whose grandson just started learning coding. Then she said it. I think your mom doesn't really grasp how important you are. I said nothing. Because she was right. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my screen. Slack messages buzzed. Jira tickets blinked. But all I could hear was, I Googled you. That night, I opened the family thread. No one had mentioned the article. No, wow, Rachel. No, is this our girl? Just a meme about Lindsay's dog and a picture of my cousin's new slow cooker. I closed it and scrolled to my voicemail. There was a missed call from my dad earlier that afternoon. He never left voicemails. Except this time, he did. I pressed play. Hey, kiddo. So, your Aunt Nora sent us something about your company. We didn't know you'd been in a magazine. That's pretty neat. Call us when you get a minute. I played it twice. Then I just sat there. Because I didn't know what I felt. Not joy. Not pride. Not even relief. Just a numb kind of waiting. The kind that comes when something you wanted for years finally arrives, but too late, and without the warmth you imagined. The next weekend, I drove home. My mom had said they were doing a family meal to celebrate Lindsay's promotion. Something about managing new interns. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw the article. Printed out. Folded neatly. Tucked under the edge of a magazine pile on the table. Like it had wandered in by mistake. No frame. No mention. Just sitting there, face down. "Hey, Rach," my mom called from the living room. "We made chicken tetrazzini. You like that, don't you?" I picked up the article, smoothed the creases. My face stared back at me. Caption: Bridging the Financial Divide. How One Woman's Code is Reshaping Access in Rural America. I ran my thumb across the headline. Then flipped it over again. At dinner, they asked how traffic was driving in. Then passed Lindsay the butter. No one brought it up. Not the article. Not the company. Not the quote where I said, "Sometimes, the people closest to you aren't the ones who see you clearest." And honestly, that line wasn't for them. It was for me. Because now, they knew. They saw it. Whether they said anything or not didn't matter the same way anymore. I was already out there. And I wasn't going back in. We were sitting around the dinner table when it finally broke. Not the table, just the silence. It was a Sunday evening. The food was gone, plates scraped clean, coffee poured. Lindsay was talking about a new protocol at the hospital, and my mom was nodding like it was the most important thing she'd heard all week. Then Uncle Curtis turned to me. "So, Rachel," he said, like he'd just remembered I was there. "Your dad mentioned you're in that magazine thing." I glanced up from my cup. "Yeah. A few weeks ago." He scratched the back of his head. "What exactly do you do again?" Before I could answer, my mom jumped in. "She builds computer apps for banks, honey. You know, it's one of those behind-the-scenes kind of jobs." And I don't know what happened in that moment. Maybe it was the way she said it. Like I was just a background extra in my own life, but something in me opened. Calmly. Cleanly. "I don't just build apps," I said. "I lead architecture for a platform that helps small banks and credit unions predict financial risk. We launched statewide coverage this year." The room went quiet. I set my mug down. You know, I used to try to explain it. Back when I thought someone might care enough to ask. Lindsay looked at me, her face softened. "I always cared, Rock." I nodded. "Then why didn't you say something?" My dad cleared his throat. "We didn't mean anything by it, kiddo. We just... It's not the kind of work we grew up around." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." My voice didn't shake. That surprised me. Every time I tried to share, someone changed the subject. Or said, "That's nice," and moved on. And after a while, I stopped trying. Because why talk to people who aren't listening? The words weren't cruel. Just real. Honest. Lindsay sat back in her chair. "I did notice," she said quietly. "At Christmas. At Easter. Mom always steers it back to me." My mom looked up, startled. "That's not fair." "It's true," Lindsay cut in. "You never ask Rachel about her work. You only talk about mine." There it was. The moment I'd waited years for, and it didn't come from me. It came from her. I exhaled, deeper than I meant to. "Remember that quote in the article?" I said. "About how success feels hollow when the people you love pretend not to see it?" My dad nodded slowly. "I wrote that." A long pause settled over the table. Then my mom reached for her coffee. "We just didn't know what to say, honey." I nodded. "That's because you never tried." No one argued. No one jumped in to defend themselves. For once, there was nothing to explain. Only a silence that finally felt honest. I looked down at the coaster under my cup. It was one of those cheap ones with a Bible verse on it, faded, curling at the edges. "Encourage one another and build each other up." I traced the edge with my thumb. A few months ago, I would have brushed it off. Now? Now it felt like something I had to do for myself. Because sometimes, the person who needs to hear the most encouragement is the one who's gone the longest without it. My mom cleared her throat. You said you launched statewide? Yeah, I said. And we just hit 500,000 users. She blinked. That's a lot. It is. For once, she didn't follow it with a but. No pivot. Just that. I stood and began clearing plates. Lindsay joined me in the kitchen. Hey, she said, lowering her voice. That quote in the article? Yeah? It hit me harder than I expected. I met her eyes. I meant it. She nodded. I know, and I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I didn't forgive her in that moment. But I believed her. And that was enough for now. It was a Tuesday morning when the voicemail came. I didn't even check it at first. I saw the number local, Pikeville area code but no name. I was already buried in a product call when it rang. Just let it go to voicemail and forgot about it. Later that night, I was halfway through reheating leftover pad thai when I saw the notification again. One new message. I tapped play. Hey Rachel, it's Pastor June Talbot. Your mama gave me your number. We read something about your company in the community bulletin, and I just wanted to say, we're proud of you, honey. It's real special what you're doing. Real special. Anyway, no rush calling me back. Just wanted you to know folks here are talking in a good way. I stood there holding the plastic fork, frozen. Not from shock. From something softer. Something unfamiliar. They said my name at church. I could picture its Sister Caroline squinting at the bulletin, Pastor June fumbling over the tech terms, someone whispering, "Isn't that Edna's daughter?" They never said my name before. Not like that. At home, it was always Lindsay's name followed by applause. Mine was a quiet footnote. That night, I called my mom. She answered on the first ring. Hey, sweetheart. Hi, I said. I got a voicemail today. She hesitated. Oh? From Pastor June. Another pause. Oh yes, she said she might call. I ran into her after service. They had one of those little write-ups in the outreach section. Someone clipped the article and sent it in. I waited. She cleared her throat. Anyway, a few folks were surprised. They didn't know you were doing all that. And you? She sighed. I think I knew more than I let on. I walked over to the window and looked out at the traffic, the glow of late spring in the city. I never needed you to get it, Mom, I said. I just needed you to try. I know, she said. And I'm sorry. It wasn't everything. But it was something, she continued, more tentative now. Your Aunt Missy said the youth group brought up your name last week. Said maybe you'd talk to them sometime. About careers. Or confidence. I laughed soft, surprised. You sure they wouldn't rather hear from Lindsay? She didn't laugh. Instead, she said, I think they've heard enough from us. Maybe it's time they heard from someone like you. I sat with that. Not because I doubted it, but because I didn't know what to do with it. She added, You've built something real, Rachel. It's not just numbers, it's impact. I hadn't heard her say that word before. Impact. From her, it landed differently. She may not have known the lingo, but she was learning the weight. Later that night, I opened a shoebox in my closet. It held old things, a flash drive from college, the printed version of my first freelance invoice, a photo of me at 15 standing next to a monitor I'd reassembled. Underneath it all was a church program from years ago. Lindsay had spoken at the Mother's Day luncheon. Her name was bolded in the program. Mine wasn't listed. Now, Pastor June had said my name at the pulpit. I didn't need it. But it still meant something. Because sometimes, being named in a room that once overlooked you feels like justice wrapped in grace. I pulled into the driveway without hesitation this time. No knots in my stomach. No imagined speeches rehearsed on the way down I-64. Just me, a weekend bag, and a lemon pound cake from the Kroger bakery. The porch light was already on. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and something fried. Probably Lindsay's doing. Her SUV was parked out front, angled a little like it always was, half on the grass. I smiled. Some things really don't change. When I walked through the front door, no one paused or looked surprised. My mom said, "There you are." Like I lived down the block instead of 2 hours away. She hugged me longer than usual. Didn't let go right away. "I made sure to pick up that oat milk creamer you like," she said. That nearly undid me more than any speech ever could. Lindsay waved from the kitchen. "Hey, big shot," she teased. "You gonna autograph our casserole dish before you leave?" I grinned. "Depends, are you selling it on eBay?" We laughed. It wasn't awkward. And that was the real miracle. At dinner, there were no big announcements. No centerpieces. No tightrope of topics to tiptoe around. But there was one moment. One small thing. My dad asked me to say grace. He'd never done that before. Not once. As we bowed our heads, I felt my voice catch just a little, but I steadied. "Thank you for this food," I said quietly. "And the people we get to share it with. For work that means something. And for knowing that sometimes being seen isn't loud. It's just honest." When I looked up, my dad gave me a little nod. Not performative. Just proud. After dinner, I helped clear plates. That's when I saw it. On the fridge. There, held by a magnet shaped like a cardinal, was the photo from the Wall Street Journal article. Below it, someone had printed out a headline from our company blog. "Rachel Emmons to speak at National Summit on Digital Equity." I stood. I didn't ask who put it there. I didn't need to. Because it didn't feel like a trophy anymore. It felt like a mirror. I was finally reflected in this house. Not because I begged for it. Not because I explained myself just right. But because I stopped shrinking, and eventually, they noticed. Later, when I stepped out onto the porch for air, Lindsay joined me. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, really good." We watched fireflies blink across the backyard. Then she bumped her shoulder against mine and said, "Next time they write about you, save me a copy. I want to frame it." I laughed. "You mean next time they write about us? I'm overdue for a casserole collab." She rolled her eyes. "That'll be the day." We stood there for a while, in quiet. The good kind. And for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like the girl at the edge of the table. I felt like I'd built one of my own.